You're ready for this one? It's time. It's rapid fire. 32 bars of fire. Part 5. Let's get it. All praise to my Lord and my Savior, Jesus.
With a brand new break, we stand true. Been it ever breaking just like I'm bamboo. There ain't nothing a guy can't do. Follow one of the jump up the new Andrew. Represent the Holy One, the middle of the war. But at the driven and I can think of the one. He gave up his only son. Look at the back of the book and know we won. Never distracted, running galactic. Everything we got to the one. Back in the word of the sheep with the speedy on my with the anaphylactic shock it off. He's the master to God. Redemption, life, I'm just speaking away from his stand up at the Arkansas. What goes on in the move is a phenomenon. Still rapping Christ. Take him to life. We're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, freedom, we're gonna get it with a bar. Still rapping Christ. Take him to life. Get it, I'm gonna get it, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, freedom, we're gonna get it with a bar. Still rapping Christ. Take him to life. Get it, I'm gonna get it, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it with the freedom, we're gonna get it with a bar. Still rapping Christ. Praise to the Messiah. Get it, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it with the freedom, we're
I dropped out there.
Okay, now I'm back.
All right.
It's
Yeah, I dropped.
That's no problem. We
dropped
made
out.
it. That's
All right.
that's a
Well,
real good song. I'm still digging it. I really like that intro.
yeah, that's my pastor. He does Christian rap, and I guess
Does he have like a whole album?
yeah, he's got several. He's got
Oh wow,
he's released 3, I think, in the last year and a half or so. But
it's a productive guy.
yeah, well, and that's called 32 Bars of Fire, Part 5, I think it is. And like 32 Bars of Fire is just trying to rap as fast as you possibly can.
That's crazy. I hope my friend gets to see this because he's really into rap and I think he'll enjoy that.
So welcome everyone. This is season 2, episode 2 of Reverend Ron's Revelation Room. We got Baxter Willaims with us. He reached out to me after I revived my show because I'm a fan of things reviving from the dead. But so if you want to introduce yourself, Baxter.
Sure, yeah. I'm Baxter Willaims, and I saw your public call out to ask if anybody wanted to appear on your show, and I was just sort of starting to use Twitter more seriously, and I was looking to engage in dialogue with people, and it looked like you were looking to do the same. So I decided to leave a comment, and hey, I made it.
Yeah, I do try to specifically have varying conversations with people from not just Christians or not just atheists or not just even I'm a Pentecostal charismatic. I try not to just have I want various people, various beliefs, various faith or no faith or whatever they would describe themselves. And so I'm glad to have you. You would describe yourself as an atheist.
I'm not so sure. It's that term is so loaded.
Yeah, it is.
I can say that I don't believe in a God that intervenes in the world, at the very least. I don't rule out gods that don't intervene because I don't know how I would rule them out. So I just, there's some people that have the deist version of the God, and that's that. I kind of look at life like I can measure from here forward and I can measure from here backward to a certain amount, and beyond that, you can't really know for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I mean, we ain't gotta try to box each other in to
Oh yeah, no. I mean, typically when I introduce myself to someone, if I'm talking to a Christian, I describe myself as an atheist because they get closer to what I'm believing than if I say I'm agnostic or something. Because then I am a deconverted Christian. I considered myself Christian at one point in the past, and now I would no longer call myself Christian. So in that regard, I do reject the Christian God as I understood it, and so that's we can all get into that.
Yeah.
There's so many different understandings. I mean, a little bit of my background. You said you were Pentecostal, charismatic. I was raised in very opposite of that. I was a evangelical Lutheran Church of America Lutheran. So very, very mainstream. probably one of the very first Protestant branches. Very much not. And it's funny, they're still called evangelical, but they're called evangelical in the old sense, evangelical. I don't
Yeah.
think many people would really describe the church as the current title of evangelical and how it goes around. But in the old Greek, I think evangel meant gospel, and they were the Lutherans.
Yeah.
They were the first ones to say that we get the truth from the gospel, not from tradition. So
Evangelion.
yeah.
But yeah. So that is a little bit different. So we're so now there's obviously varying flavors of Lutheranism.
Yeah.
Um, were you of a strain that was deterministic, would you say?
No, I wouldn't say. My strain was pretty liberal. I would say people consider it a liberal denomination nowadays. Um, they wouldn't think in determinism. They definitely think the free will, determining your own path. Um, there was a lot of depending on which church you went to, you had different opinions on things like
Mhm.
I even had a Lutheran pastor. If you want to describe how liberal it could be, I even had a Lutheran pastor um, who, when I tried to talk to him about my troubles with the concept of hell, he said, "Well, Jesus died and went to hell for 3 days, and you know why he did that? So he could open the door from hell back to heaven. So now all you have to do when you're in hell is make a choice to join God, and you can leave." I'm like, wow, that's a very different view than,
Yeah.
than I hear from most people. So yeah, you could say it was pretty widely liberal. I wasn't actually. I
Mhm.
sort of self-imposed a much more conservative version of Christianity on myself. It was not necessarily from my church. It was just from reading the Bible and interpreting how I thought it should be interpreted. But my church itself was not deterministic, conservative anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that is one of the problems with Christianity, and I think I think to some degree it's actually a strength, but it's one of the problems with Christianity is there is a wide variety of beliefs. There's a lot of denominations,
Yeah.
and so that's one of the things I think often goes awry in the so-called atheist and Christian conversation is the individual Christian is likely to have any number set of beliefs within the Christian paradigm,
Oh yeah.
and often with the atheist in the Christian conversation, the you know the Christian gets forced into confessing something that they may not actually confess because they're since you're a Christian, so you must believe this, and there's
Sure.
very few of those must be believe parts, right? It's like you must believe that Jesus is Lord, that he was born of a virgin and died for 3 days and
Yeah.
then was resurrected,
Yeah, you'd be
and
surprised. I mean,
Jesus died for the sins of the world.
yeah, I
But
think one of the
when you
advantages
start
that I
getting
have.
beyond
Oh,
that,
sorry.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of variation.
Yeah, it is. And I think a lot of people, when they have discussions across faith boundaries, um, they try to pin each other down real quick. I think one of the advantages that I have over a lot of the dialogue, atheist first, uh, Christian or other kind of faiths, a lot of the I shouldn't say a lot. It's a good mix. But I do think
Yeah,
that people who were previously considered themselves Christians, they have a lot more of a sympathetic view to a Christian person than someone who was never Christian. Um, and so, like, I don't ever think that if someone tells me, even if they tell me they're Pentecostal charismatic, I'm not going to just assume that you speak in tongues on Sunday and do all this other stuff. Like, I
yeah,
I can't assume anything. I've met so many people in different walks of life in Christianity, even within the same pew, in what they believe.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, if you want to talk to a person, you got to talk to a person, right?
yeah,
You, you can't just make them an avatar of what you think they are or what even such things, right? Well, I'm a Christian, so you must be this. I'm going to make you into this avatar, then I'm going to attack that avatar, or I'm going to assume
yeah,
you're the avatar, or you're an atheist, and I'm going to attack this avatar of an atheist that I
yeah,
have in my own imagination. and not listen to what you're saying, or you're not going to listen to what I'm saying, and I want to assume this and assume that. But when you're talking to an individual, you're supposed to talk to an individual, right? That's the way, only way.
Yeah, and I think it is a thing that a lot of struggles happen where people don't quite give each other the breath that they have to explore, what they could be. There's I would say, for example, what really widened my eyes was when I was trying to explore. I would say my deconversion went in steps. I started exploring different denominations, then I started exploring just different approaches to Christianity. Then I sort of left it finally. And when I was exploring different denominations, I remember coming across Jehovah's Witnesses, and they didn't even affirm the Trinity. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I thought that was a basic belief, but I guess you still consider yourself Christian. And then you've got you start researching and you find the people before the Council of Nicaea that also didn't believe in the Trinity, and that's why the Council of Nicaea happened. And
Hmm.
so it's yeah, there's wide variety. If I were to assume though, someone labeled themselves Christians today, because of course I have assumptions. I have to assume something.
Well, you have to
I would,
operate with them.
yeah,
The problem is not to make assumptions. The problem is when you don't let new information change your assumptions.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. If I had to describe what I would consider a Christian, now, if obviously I can change. If I have a conversation with someone, they tell me something different, I'll just accept it. I'm not going to fight them on it. But if I have a picture in my head, I typically think of Christ as in the translation of Messiah. They think Jesus is the Messiah foretold in prophecy, at the minimum. Then I would also say that I can reasonably safely assume in the Western Hemisphere that they believe in the Trinity. And then after that, I don't know if I can really assume much else. After that, it kind of branches. Yeah, but no, I'd love to talk about the relative journeys. I'd love to hear more about yours. I know you have a thread up on your Twitter pinned about your own journey, and I know you mentioned something in it where I think you said raised in a Christian environment, transitioned to maybe an atheist thinking environment, and then back to a Christian one. Was it the same Pentecostal charismatic when you were raised?
Well, I say, I may have said, I'm in a small southern town, and there's a church on every street corner. So the culture of the local culture is going to be nominally Christian, right? It's going to be, most people are going to somewhat believe in God and Jesus and have been to church a few times. And I went to church till I was about 11 or 12, very sporadically, and I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah.
And well, let's see. What I do remember, the impression I got from church when I was growing up was the hypocristian types, right? The ones that would go to church on Sunday and be all community and pious, but you step out of church on Monday and they don't even act like they know you. They shook your hand at church, but then you step out on Monday and they don't even look at you or know you. And so I thought, I saw a lot of that. I thought, and I never really believed any of it. It was just something that we did. And we weren't reading the Bible at home or praying or any of that.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
So it's very different from my experience.
Yeah. So, nominally Christian as in a vague idea of God and Jesus.
Sure.
But we didn't do any Bible reading or studying or prayer or any of that stuff, and we didn't hardly go to church. We went very sporadically until I was about 11 or 12, and then we just kind of quit.
And then you kind of danced around a whole bunch of different things, and then until you find your way back. When would you say you started your journey back to Christianity, approximately? I think you said you became Christian again 39, but did you start earlier? Just sort of.
Well, that's when I would confess Christ, right? That's when I believe.
Mhm.
The church I go to now, I started going to for maybe, I think it was about almost 2 years before I actually believed. Or is at least a year. And
Okay. Sorry, I just saw that. I see that we're missing the chat. My friend actually is in the chat. He's commenting on the
yeah.
video. Oh, I can't see it then. That's probably my problem.
Oh,
Okay. Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. But as far as growing up, no, I mean, growing up, I was not at all a Christian. And then I felt like I saw a lot of hypocrites in churches. So, and I thought I had an idea of the Bible, that I knew enough to know about the Bible or whatever. And I saw a lot of hypocrites. And I actually became, for quite some time, I would I was a militant atheist, what I would say. You know, I wanted to purposely poke the bear and offend Christians and religious people. And then I was the chill out dude for a while. I just didn't believe anything, but I wasn't going to go try and do flame wars or anything. try to purposely provoke anybody. And then as I lived, I thought about it less and cared about it less, and so I would be an agnostic. I just didn't care or think about it.
Sure.
I still studied philosophy. I became really big into philosophy. I thought that was going to be the key to unlock all the doors, was philosophy.
Sure.
So I became a huge into philosophy, and then I had some spiritual experience, and it was hard to, a spiritual experience is ineffable. It's not totally explainable, and and I became more of a pagan, right? Like a European pagan.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Yeah, and it was from there that I became a Christian. I was actually a Norse pagan, and then
Oh,
became a Christian.
that's funny because that's much more around here. Like from Minnesota, that's for the Norse.
No, oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. There's a large contingent of Scandinavians up there,
Yeah, yeah.
but the Norse really appealed to me with the warrior ethos,
Yeah.
And I always make the joke is I'm a true Norse pagan because I did like the Norse and converted and got baptized. But,
Hey, fair enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a Christian household, right?
Yeah, I was much more Christian than it sounds like you were growing up.
Yeah.
I remember some of my earliest memories was being an usher at church. And I was like the little 3-year-old handing out the pamphlets for the songs for the day to all the people. They thought I was so cute, and I thought I was so important. I remember that very clearly, and I remember praying next to bed every night all through high school. I started off with, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep, if you're familiar with that one. And then I gradually graduated to the Lord's Prayer, the Nicene Creed. There was another one, Jezebel's Prayer, I think. It was my mom's favorite. Can't remember off the top of my head that one. But I was praying next to my bed every day, all the way through high school, and I was very Christian. I went to Bible camps. Actually, my buddy Kyle, he also went there with me. We both became camp leaders. Not leaders of the camp, but like we were considered leaders to teach the next generation. And that's when I had always had like little questions I hadn't had answered. But there's a lot of things I could overcome with works. I was very inspired by volunteering and caring for other people and donating my time, and that always just reignited my faith. But there's these things that are in the back of my head, and when I started teaching, and when the kids started asking the questions I couldn't answer, then I started getting a little upset. And so that's when I started questioning things a little bit more seriously. But I was very, very Christian environment. And I would say I self-imposed, I mentioned this earlier, but I self-imposed a stricter form of Christianity than most people. One of the things, I'll give Lutherans credit for this, one of the things I think they do better than most Christian denominations is they have a confirmation. which means you are required to study the Bible and study the works of Martin Luther and reaffirm your baptism around middle schoolish. And so, we're talking 3 years of Bible classes you're required to take, which is, I like that. I like that they encourage the study.
Well,
and yeah,
I'm obviously Protestant, but that is something about like Lutherans, Eastern Orthodox Church, and the Catholic Church is you do have to go through such things. You have to go through I can't even say the word, catechism, whatever.
Catechism, yeah.
Yeah, catechism, yeah. Problem I run into is I usually encounter words by reading them, not hearing them, so I don't always know how to say them.
Very relatable.
Yeah, catechism. And I think that's actually, I think it's a really good thing, but there's also, it's not just a good thing because I don't want barriers to entry, but also it's good for a person to experience that education.
Yeah. And I can understand that. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, like with my kind of church, you get someone, we do the altar call and they go up to the altar and they pray and they confess Jesus, and then it's like, yay, woohoo, yeah. And then there's often no discipleship, right? You don't teach, maybe they'll come to Bible study on Sunday morning and then come to service on Sunday morning, but there's not a program of discipleship or teaching.
I know my dad would read to me from the Bible every night. He did Bible study every Wednesday and Saturday. He brought me that when I was a kid. Like there was a lot of study, and I didn't think of it as a barrier at the time, because I was already baptized. I was already as an infant baptized, and I was already welcomed as part of the community. But they said, in order for you, so you could join immediately, but you couldn't. There's another level of joining after you've made an informed decision where you've read of things and then you reaffirm what we call a confirmation Lutheranism. And I really like that. I really like that idea, honestly. I think a lot of people should have at least, even if they join right away, they should have another period of study and then a reaffirmation. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a barrier, but it can be.
Oh, yeah, I can understand.
Maybe, to some people. But anyways, I think it is good. It is good overall. For one, I mean, okay, so one of the problems I think that Christians face is there's a really bad culture in a lot of churches where you don't ask questions, right? You just shut up and listen. That is a real bad thing in a lot of churches.
Yeah.
And that's something that did turn me off as a kid, because I've always been the why person. It's like, well, tell me why, right? And if you're going to give me the well, just because, or that's what we believe, or whatever, some kind of answer like that, I'm going to be like, that's not good enough.
I remember very clearly my first unanswered question. It was my first not my first. It was my second confirmation class. We had received our Bibles and our reading assignments. We were supposed to come back the next day to talk about the reading, and then we were also supposed to pick our favorite Bible story to share with the class. And I wanted to be like an advanced reader, so I read way ahead. and I came back to the story, and I came back to the class the next week, and I wanted to share with them the story of in Judges of Gideon and I can't think of them right now, but gosh, I can't think of the name right now. But there's a story in the Bible early in Judges which talks about them conquering their enemies by surrounding them on the hilltops, carrying torches and clay pots, and then breaking them all at once and shouting, and all the soldiers down below attack each other and start killing each other. And I thought that was so cool. I was like, oh my God, God can make the enemies just kill each other. I was like, oh, it's awesome. And my teacher was like, oh, that's, let's move on to the next favorite. I'm like, well, what do you mean move on to the next favorite? This is my favorite story. And they're like, no, let's just talk about Jonah's whale and the ark and other kind of stories. And I was like, why can't, and she's like, shush, you're interrupting the class. That was the first time I had an unanswered question. I got real upset. Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah. And that is a problem in church, in a lot of American church culture, right? Especially American Protestantism. And see, my denomination wouldn't be considered what you'd say mainline.
And it's not really evangelical, so to say. It's not like part of the evangelical big E, but it's evangelical church. I mean, we evangelize. We're very mission oriented.
Yeah.
And evangelism oriented, reaching out into the community and stuff. But we're not part of the mainstream evangelical. But there's a real bad thing, and especially common in American Protestantism, of anti-intellectualism, right, or anti-exploration, and that's horrible. You know, you can't just say, well, have faith. I mean, if someone's got a question, that's a place to park and have a conversation and to study. And I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, is you can't just push questions out of the way. You know, it's like that's going to bother you. And it's my opinion, if you're reading the Bible and you're like, well, that didn't make any sense at all, or even I don't like that, and it's like you need to kind of park there and study something until you get some sort of answer or some sort of indication of what's going on.
Yeah, but there's only sometimes there's only so far you can go with that analysis.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You'll get into the people who spend their life studying that specific passage and they'll disagree over its meaning.
Oh yeah.
And then where does that lead?
Yeah, and there's not. That's not going to happen. You know, you're not going to be like. Some people will tell you that there's only one meaning to anything, and if you don't confirm it, then you're a heretic. But there's very good multiple interpretations by very sincere people who are very faithful. But what I mean basically is don't just ignore questions.
Sure. Well,
and like I said, I've always been the why person. It's like I can't just not know. You know, sure. I got to go find something. You know, at least something. You know, sometimes I leave things off in faith, as in the Lord will reveal it to me later. Or maybe I'll read something later and it'll make sense of it. But I like to study. Well, and that's something that I brought to the Bible whenever I finally got around. You know, I converted when I was 39, started studying the Bible, reading the Bible, studying it, I guess, when I was about 37-ish, 8. And it was actually Jordan Peterson that got me to do that.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. He did that biblical lecture series, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, of course, he was extrapolating psychological meaning in the Bible. But what that did for me was it illuminated two things. One, I realized that our kids, I got 4 stepkids, they didn't know any at all of the Bible stories. They didn't know who Noah, they didn't have a clue who Noah was. And, you know, I say I didn't remember anything about going to church, but I do know, I was generally aware of Noah and Moses and Jesus and Peter, and, you know, I was generally aware of the presence or the stories. And our kids didn't have any clue. I mean, they couldn't tell you, they couldn't even give you, they wouldn't even know the name Noah or Moses, you know. And so 2 things happened was I figured the church we started going to is just down the road. I thought, well, we should go to church for, well, actually there was 3 reasons, all right. We needed some sort of community. We were isolated as a family, and my wife and I as adults, we didn't have much community around us. And we needed some sort of community. The kids needed at least an introduction to the stories. Just an introduction. That's all I was looking for. Like I said, I didn't convert for at least a year after I started going to that church. And I never took them, and I still don't, I never took them saying, you got to believe in Christianity. Right? And I just wanted them to at least get some sort of familiarity with the Bible and the stories. And 3 was, I had never actually read the Bible. Right? I just
Sure.
assumed a lot of stuff or what people had said, and I never sat down and read the Bible for myself at all. And I thought I knew the story, right? Well, whenever I decided to sit down and read the Bible, what I tried to do, and of course we've all got biases, we've all got presuppositions. I tried as much as I possibly could to take all my presuppositions and biases and throw them out the window and just read the Bible, right? And try to let it speak for itself. Read the Bible in its own voice, so to speak. And that's in my thread, my pinned tweet, but it was completely different from what I thought.
Yo, John. Good to see you.
Oh, you know John?
Yeah, actually, John and I connected over in a Discord chat before I came on Twitter, really.
I know John fairly well.
Yeah, so Jordan Peterson, I'd love to pull up this thread a little bit. So I've noticed that in a lot of your videos, you'll reference Jordan Peterson. In fact, one of them, I think you mentioned that he got you into Twitter.
Yeah.
And so he got you into church and he got you into Twitter.
Yeah.
Do you see Jordan Peterson? Because I see a lot of people seeing him as a spearhead for Christianity today, and yet you also see Jordan Peterson saying, these are wonderful stories that underpin morals, and he's really hesitant to go any further.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about. Obviously you respect the guy. Like I said, he's pulled you into a lot of stuff. I'm curious what you think of what his influence is on Christianity as a whole.
Well, and I found Peterson initially for the psychology. Okay, I found him just before he blew up. Especially before the bill C-16 in Canada and the big, the semi-famous video of all the LGBTQ plus people yelling at him, yelling in his face and stuff. I found him just before that, and it was because I was following psychology. Because, like I said, I got 4 stepchildren, right? And I won't go too far into it, but there was a lot of problems in the family, and I thought I could solve it with psychology, right? And so I started diving into psychology, and that's when I found Peterson. But and I started following his psychology stuff, and that's when I became a follower, or I won't want to say follower in that like he was my Messiah. It's not like I was holding on to his hymn coat. That's when I started listening to Peterson. That's when I started, and of course at that time, also is when Laurier, this Lindsay Shepherd at Laurier blew up. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't remember that one.
But that was about the time I got on Twitter. And I did get on Twitter because of Jordan Peterson, because I was on Facebook, because I'm old-ish. But I was on Facebook, and I would following Jordan on Facebook. Well, what I realized was all of his stuff on Facebook was just like screen captures and stuff from Twitter. He was actually on Twitter. He wasn't actually on Facebook. And so that's why I decided to give Twitter a shot. And so
this might be a good transition into the Twitter discussion and what we're using it for.
Yeah, well, when I first got on Twitter,
Go ahead.
I was not a Christian. That was what, 2018, I think. So, and I haven't erased anything, so you could search me and you could see a lot of cussing and different stuff.
I don't know if I can. I'd have to filter through 73,000 tweets you have.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's quite a bit. It's been a few years now, but yeah, it was Jordan got me to come to Twitter because I didn't necessarily think I was going to be able to interact with him, but I wanted to be able to at least actually interact in the community around Jordan Peterson. Right, that's why I ended up on Twitter. But when I got on Twitter, it was around the time of the Canada was doing the Bill C-16, and Jordan had released his statement on it, and Lindsay Shepherd had her deal with at Laurier University, and so between that, I end up actually initially knowing a lot of Canadians on Twitter, which was kind of weird. And I've always been a free speech advocate and all that. And of course, I wasn't a Christian at the time, and I would say I was a secular humanist, as well as a pagan. I was my personal philosophy was paganism. You know, I had a personal spirituality of paganism, Norse paganism, but my actual philosophy was like secular humanist. That's how I operated in the world.
Sure.
I had my private spirituality over here that was separate from everything over here, right? And so I got into a lot of free speech, and I call myself a classic liberal. And I actually had a moment there where I was a anarcho-capitalist, but I recovered from that. But
We all have our anarchy moments, you know. It happens.
yeah, yeah.
Burn it all down.
But so you said you actually were on Discord with John before you got on Twitter?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I just had started Twitter really, and I did run into him.
Yeah, so
Hey, John.
yeah, you ain't got. I noticed you don't have very many followers. I didn't really pay attention when you had joined.
Yeah, no, you allowed me to come on here. I think when I was at when I messaged you, I think I was at 30 followers.
Oh wow!
In the last like 2-3 weeks, I've sort of exploded. Not really. I mean, in relative terms, up to like 140 followers, or I think I'm at 130 now. But
yeah,
I just had a couple threads go viral. I had a thread on my perspective on Jesus as a non-Christian that took off. That one took off way more than I expected it to. And more recently, I had a thread on my agnostic beliefs, or not really, but like how absurd I think all the options are for answers of finality, origins, that kind of stuff. Whether or not you can even ask the question about origins. I think they're absurd, which I think is fine to admit.
Well, and you know, that was another point I thought to mention is and it completely ran out of my mind. Go on.
Sorry. No, yeah. No, Twitter. So I'd like to talk about Twitter on our usage for Twitter. So I feel like I don't want to strawman you here, but I feel like it's common to assume that someone on social media that's commonly speaking from a Christian perspective would like to spread the good news. Evangelize per se along those lines.
Absolutely.
And I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of questions about, well, why is the other person doing anything? Like, why would someone like me being on Twitter? Am I trying to evangelize atheism?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like, I feel like a lot of people have that question. And I feel like I could talk to you about, you know, first off, did I nail why you were on Twitter? Because it seems like no. You seems like you started on Twitter as a anarcho-capitalist, libertarian, classic, fighting for whatever. But maybe you transitioned now. I'm not sure. I'm curious to see your perspective on what you use it for now, what you hope to achieve from it. Oh, I think we lost.
But I was libertarian, definitely, and that's when I met of the videos. I've got Jordan Goldstein and Lee Meller. They're both Canadians, and like I said, I ended up with a lot of Canadian connections, and I had more Canadians than Americans for a while. But and yeah, I was real big on that. And you know, if I had a belief system, it was like the U.S. Constitution and the ideals of the U.S. Constitution, and like John Locke, you know,
sure,
that kind of thing. And yeah, and then I was still on Twitter whenever I became a Christian, and so there was a subtle shift. And, you know, when I first became Christian, it's like any time, it's natural, it's unfortunately natural, like any time someone makes a shift in their perspective, like they become a Christian or they quit being a Christian. And it's like you got to go out and shout it from the rooftops, and then you're arguing with everyone who's on the other side of you, and you're like calling them fools, and you're being an ass about it. And so I've done that,
Well, there's
but
always
I've
a
gotten a
sense
lot
of
better about it.
there's always a sense of it's going to be a natural superiority that comes from changing one's mind. I mean, obviously, when anyone changes their mind,
Yeah.
they change their mind for a reason. And if they think they've found a
Yeah.
good reason to change their mind, they think they've found the right answer. So that does happen. But I would say mine is a little bit different. I actually was completely silent. And my family didn't hear anything about me leaving Christianity for 10 years. I didn't mention it to really anyone. I had to think a couple friends in high school that I mentioned it to after I graduated, but it was a pretty quiet. I slipped out in the middle of the night. But yeah, I wanted to, and that's when you talk about things like people who they'll swing into like a very anti-theist. That is a very common thing. The stereotype of the angry atheist exists for a reason. I spend a lot of time in support groups for people who leave faiths, but mostly Christianity, trying to help them handle all the emotions they're feeling. This is one of my reasons I'm on Twitter. I think that there are a lot of people who, especially if they change their mind or come to a realization in a very public sphere like Twitter, they kind of explode. They swing. They're like a roller coaster.
Oh yeah.
I think that helping these people understand what they're feeling, helping them calm down, settle out. I hope to try to mend a little bit of bridges between people who are religious and people who are non-religious. As an ex-Christian, I don't think they have any ill will for me. I don't, because otherwise, if I thought that, then I thought that I had ill will for everyone else, and I didn't.
Yeah.
I wanted to save people. I wanted to save their eternal souls. I think Penn Jillette said, I almost find it disrespectful if they don't try to convert me, because that means it's like they think that they see a train coming to hit me, and they think, screw them.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's. I don't blame Christians at all for that, and I think it's good for me to try to help and teach other deconverts about that, to help them realize that there's a lot of feelings of betrayal. There's a lot of feelings of wasted life whenever you have a conversion later in life. A lot of bitterness. It was taken from me. You need someone to blame. You need something to point to. And one of the hardest things to come to terms with when you leave a faith system is understanding that you might not have answers to all your questions anymore, and you're going to have to sit with the uncertainty, and you might not have someone to blame. And that takes a long time to adjust. So I think that's one of the reasons I'm on there. And the other one is I just want to engage with what I'm not feeling. Like, if I am on a particularly, when I was a Christian, I tended to only read atheist material because I already agreed with the Christian material. I wasn't learning anything from it. And when I became a really angry atheist, I read a lot of Christian material to see if I could own it and overcome it. And depending on what I'm feeling on the day, I try to read what I disagree with. So I think going to Twitter was just a natural step for someone who doesn't speak to their family about these things or their friends that often. So I just had to get that out.
Well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you got that out of there. And let me be clear. There's absolutely people who have been harmed in some churches and by some Christians. And that's definitely true. It's called, commonly something like church hurt, right? That's one of the catchphrases for it. And it's a very real thing. And I totally get that. And my heart is for those people. And yes, I want everyone to believe in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, because I am convinced of the truth of that. But I am not more concerned, but I'm also concerned about people being healed from their experience, I don't want to say damage. I don't want to use that word, but be healed from their traumatic experiences. To me, like one of the greatest, and I should have this memorized, but one of the greatest things is like in particularly Luke, when Jesus reads from Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to declare freedom for the prisoner and sight for the blind. And it's like, yes, that's my heart's cry. Whether, that's always been like my heart's cry for people, is to be free and to be healed from any trauma that they've had, and to be whole. That's what I've always wanted for people, and that's especially now what I want for people. And yes, I do think that it's through Christ that you find that. But even still, I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate what your goal is to do as well, because I want people to succeed, to thrive, to be healed, to find themselves. I want all that for people.
Yeah, and also things like this. I really want to jump at this opportunity because I'm not comfortable yet speaking about my opinions.
Yeah.
I'm learning, but
Yeah.
I'd love to show how you can have healthy, productive, non-confrontational dialogue with someone you disagree with, especially on a faith-based decision. I'm a little bit of a believer in, I don't know how else to describe it besides exposure therapy for people who have left the faith. Some of them, I can't even imagine, they'll get cold sweats if they think about going into a church again. If they think about hearing about Jesus again. It took a long time. Like I said, I was a silent atheist for about 10 years. It took a long time for me to get to the point where I can pray, I can enter a church, I can do a worship. I don't have any issues with it. It doesn't bother my mind anymore. And this is where the stereotype comes from. I do want to be clear about this because it's a difference. There's a lot of Christians that think that these Christians hate Christianity and they can't stand it. It sickens them. And that's not necessarily the case. I think that they would love to be at a point where they don't react to it, and they maybe even aspire to that. But just like anyone who has a traumatic experience, like a soldier in a war who would love to sleep through the night, it's hard to get through it sometimes. It's a weird thing, trauma. Obviously, trauma is a very vague word, but when people have trauma, what it really comes down to, roughly, in my opinion, is they have memories that interrupt their ability to function in the world. They can't they can't work, they can't form relationships, they can't sleep. If you have some memory that's stopping you from doing that, it could be something as simple as what if I'm wrong? And they're just terrified of hell still. That's what they would describe as trauma. And so I want them to be able to overcome that and be healthy around people who are religious. It takes a long time. I don't know the best techniques for it, but I like to describe it as, imagine you're doing something for a friend. I have a very good Hindu friend. If he invited me to come to a temple and just observe his temple, I would have had no issue. But at that same point, if someone had asked me to go into a church and pray with them, I'd have been, I don't know if I can do that. And it's like, well, what's the difference? Well, why do you have such a casual reaction to this religion and such a harsh reaction to this religion? So that's something that I really want to heal the divide, because I want to teach people who are Christians that this is not them hating you. It seems like it if you look at them that way. And they'd like to not be like that.
Well, it's undoubtful that Christians have their problems. I freely admit a lot of those. And it's like, we don't have to, well, in my opinion, from Jesus Christ that I read in the Bible, I don't get to hate anyone, right? Whether they accept or reject Jesus, I still don't get to hate them. That's the way I read Jesus. Someone pointed this out not too long ago, and it's like when the rich young ruler asked Jesus, "Well, what do I have to be saved?" And Jesus said, "Sell all your stuff and give up everything you got and follow me." And the rich young ruler was like, "Well, I can't do that." But Jesus didn't say, "Hey, Peter, throw a stone and hit him in the head. You know, he didn't say. He let him walk away. Right? And you know, there are a lot of parts in there where Jesus is harsh to people. But the thing that's very notable about that is those are people who are supposed to know better, right? Right? That he was harsh to.
Yeah.
Like the teachers of the law and the Pharisees and stuff. You know, like, you should know this stuff, but you don't, and I'm going to be harsh to you. But he's not so harsh to people who don't know. But and I have a similar goal. Is like, I don't, as a Christian, I don't have to be. I can have a dialogue with somebody. I can talk to someone. Jordan was on Joe Rogan recently, Jordan Peterson.
Yes, he was very famous.
And he made a comment. Yeah. And, you know, I loved it. But he made a comment there that really hit me. And this was right after I shared my, you had contacted me. But he said something, I'm probably going to mess it up, but genuine dialogue was like the antidote to the existential crisis for a moment, you know, something like that. And I believe that. It's like, one of the things I love the most is to have a genuine dialogue with someone, to have a genuine conversation, to engage with them, and to talk, to try to understand you, you understand me. We let our ideas interact and see where we come out. And we don't have to agree, but it's just, I love it, you know.
Yeah, I totally believe in dialogue as well. I think that what's the razor? Maybe someone in the comments could help me. Hanlon's razor. It's a little bit crude. I think it can be rephrased, but it says never attribute to malice what can easily be attributed to stupidity. Yeah. Instead of stupidity, I would phrase it like ignorance or, you know, lack of awareness. But I grip that razor with an iron fist. I don't let go of that razor for a second.
And you know, like I said, I don't know if I've mentioned it here, but I kind of fell off of this channel that I started for about a year, almost exactly a year. And part of that was that I didn't feel like I was in the right place to be trying to do this exercise or this video. You know, I don't know exactly how to. I couldn't have great conversation. I didn't feel like I could have great conversations, especially with people who didn't believe, you know, or atheists. But recently I was on Twitter, and I started interacting with more atheists very recently. And I realized whenever I was talking to them, I was okay. I was at peace. I didn't lose my peace, so to speak. And I didn't attack them, or I didn't take things personally. And I kept focused on my point that I was trying to make, and I interacted with them. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time for me to try this again. And I do appreciate what you're saying about, because, okay, yeah, let's get back to that. There are definitely people who have been hurt in churches, right? There are definitely people who have experienced trauma. And, you know, as a, and yes, I do appreciate what was Hanlon's razor. I know that, I know it, but I can't think of it. But never attribute to malice. I like your formulation of that, because I didn't like the stupidity part, honestly, because it is usually ignorance or a lack of information that I would rather say, you know. But
Baxter's razor.
And I try it.
I said Baxter's razor. You rephrase Hanlon's razor.
But
awareness.
And that is an important approach to take, you know, is Hanlon's razor. And I just felt recently in my interactions on Twitter that I was at the right place to be doing that. I wasn't going to go cage stage believer, you know, like everyone who doesn't believe in God is a depraved individual who just wants to sin. That's the only reason why they don't believe in God. I wasn't going to say anything like that. I would listen to people, and I took some shots from some the militant atheist, anti-theist types, and I didn't just bite their heads off, or I didn't engage in insults. Yeah, and which was interesting was I was already talking with some atheists, and another one showed up who's like the anti-theist type, right? The militant one, and they just like we were talking about the non sequitur show recently fired back up, and they were having a comparison between Christianity and atheism, and I was trying to make the point that I didn't think atheism and Christianity was a direct comparison. I thought that Christianity was downstream from where you would be at atheist. Atheist and theist are on that same level, and I feel like Christianity is downstream from atheist because it's a very specific, defined belief system, right? And then atheism is just a lot more amorphous and not specific. So atheism and theist would kind of be comparable, but saying atheism and Christianity, I didn't feel like it was a proper comparative conversation.
Yeah.
And then I had this like
Sorry, keep going.
Go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
I was just saying, you've got the atheism of people who are not theist, where all they have is uncertainty, which some people, they can enjoy living in that environment. They live in an uncertain environment, but because they live in an uncertain environment, you're never going to pin their certainties down. So you're going to have a hard time comparing the two. But there are atheists out there, atheology on Twitter and others I've run into that, or just in general, the philosophy school in the academic sphere, atheism is a very declarative. There is no God. The universe operates without a God. But if you get to the casual sphere, which is most of the world, let's be honest, it's not the world's not academic philosophers. They're going to use it that way, and you're going to have to ask them more concretely what they do believe. That's it's going to be tricky. For me, for example, if you were to ask me what I do believe, not what I don't believe, because like I can tell you I don't believe Christianity. Okay, well then what does that tell you about me?
Yeah.
So what I do believe is that, for example, when it comes to any kind of religion, there tends to be a definition of us. I think for Christianity, it's humans. You've got, or conscious creatures, consciousness, perhaps. Some people just bring it down to consciousness. I think after I accepted the theory of evolution, I could no longer divide us by species. So if I ever were to define us in a religion, I would have to expand it beyond species, beyond humans, to sort of all life. So that's one thing I do believe. I don't believe that I could ever accept a religion again that separates human from the rest as part of a purpose thing. The other one I do believe is that, for example, souls is a very common thing. What do I believe about souls? I think when we discovered the human egg in 1827 and found out that life doesn't come from nothing, it comes from life, and it's a continuous process that's always been going since the dawn of time. I have a really hard time accepting any kind of ensolation, like souls happen here, or no, right there, no, right here. If I were to accept any kind of religious framework, it would have to be that humans are, bubbles floating off a soapy mass. You are separate, but you're from the same material. I have a real hard time embracing any theologies nowadays that have anything to do with me existing as a separate soul from another person, if there were to be any afterlife. So these are like things that I do believe if I had to assert anything about religion. And of course, these are all non-testable things, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. As far as things like beginnings, I don't know. Like, people talk about multiverse theory. That's how you get the fine tuning. Well, then what happened before the multiverse? People talk about conformal cyclic cosmology. Okay, but then who created the cycle to begin with? I have a hard time accepting infinities. Are you a panpsychist, Baxter? So I have a hard time accepting infinities in general. I feel like determinism says something along the lines of there are laws at work. They everything behaves according to the laws, and you could say, well, the laws go back for infinity. It's kind of like me. To me, that's like saying. So to me, that's like saying when you're pushing the boulder up a hill, only for it to fall down, and then you can do it again and again and again. You say that he never began pushing that boulder up a hill. He was always pushing that boulder up a hill. To me, there's something absurd about that. So I don't really have hard statements on origins. I just can't find out.
Yeah.
But I will tell you one thing. There's a huge imbalance between Christianity and atheism for two reasons. Not just because atheism is specific and Christianity is specific, but because Christianity has my soul on the line. I don't have your soul on the line.
Yeah.
There's a fundamental difference in the amount of motivation we have to convince each other, in my opinion. There are some atheists that believe that truth is just like saving a soul, and pursuing truth is like the best thing you can possibly do, but I guess I'm not one of those.
Well, and you do strike at the point. One of the points I have with the atheist versus Christian arguments or conversations is I don't think it's a structurally I don't think it's proper structurally. It's like, for one, I think Christianity specifically is downstream from atheism because you got theists, and Christianity is part of theism, but it doesn't encompass all of theism. There's other theistic beliefs within, other than Christianity. And another thing is, I don't think it's very productive for me to have to try and compare what I do believe against what this other person doesn't believe. It's like, I don't care what you don't believe. I want to know what you believe. I want to talk about positive beliefs, right?
Sure.
It's like, let's talk about positive beliefs. Okay. That's where the interaction is. There's no interaction between, well, I don't believe this, but I believe this. And I don't think I think the conversation structured wrong. All right. And like I said with it is, I think, so Christianity is downstream from atheist or theist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think if you're going to have a comparative, then you're going to have something like secular humanist compared to Christianity.
Sure.
And so you have to have a positive belief against a positive belief. You can't have a negative belief versus a positive belief, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
And what's interesting, John asked that question right at the same time when you were talking. I was thinking, is Baxter a panpsychist? I was thinking the exact same thing.
So I'm going to be completely honest here. I have done a lot of thinking on my own for the last 10 years. All these terms are new to me. You'll have to define panpsychism for me, and I'll tell you whether or not I am.
All right, I might have to actually look that one up. Basically, panpsychist, as I'm going to try to do this. A panpsychist believes that there is everything that exists shares a consciousness. That even immaterial objects or animals are of the same conscience. That there's some element of that consciousness that we all share, whether it's a rock or it's an animal or it's a human being. That we're all connected in one with the same consciousness. At least a part of that conscious is connected through all things.
Yeah, I would say I'm not. Yeah, I think I don't think rocks have consciousness, but I do think consciousness is immaterial. I don't think it's dualism. I personally would define consciousness somewhere around 10 billion cortical neurons. When you get to about that level, you start seeing things like grieving for the dead, expressing simple language, drawing simple things. When you get up to about 13 billion neurons, you start seeing more comprehension of grammar, structure, things like that. Humans are, I think, at about 15 billion. So if you could have a network of independently communicating things, like if you could get to the point that, say, for example, there were 15 billion independent humans sending messages to each other and communicating towards some goal, you could make an argument to me that that collection of humans expresses a consciousness at a higher level. But I'm not going to attribute it to the universe because I don't think there's like a lot of back and forth communication happening. Gravity's just sucking stuff and dark energy is just exploding stuff.
Well, here's John and I are somewhat familiar with panpsychism because we've been kind of have a shared, not so much a community, but a loose community or group of people that we know, and this stuff gets brought up, and particularly I've actually been very convinced so far about idealism from a Christian perspective.
All right.
Are you familiar with idealism?
No. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's fine. There's one person named Bernardo Kastrup.
Okay.
He's been, I've recently come in contact with his work, and I think it's fascinating. Well, the basic idea is that consciousness is a ontological primitive, right? You can't reduce it. You can't reduce past consciousness. Are you tracking with that concept?
I've heard things similar to that. Someone recently tried to tell me on Twitter that do you see quantum fluctuations as emerging from a root consciousness, or do you see consciousness as a buildup of material non-conscious things? So is that what they're kind of getting at, this panpsychism thing?
Maybe. I didn't exactly follow that.
Yeah, I didn't follow it either.
Well, and the thing is there are some things out there that are just absolutely mind-blowing, and they're coming out, and it's just quantum mechanics. It's mind-blowing. There's several different theories about quantum mechanics, right? If anyone tells you they know exactly what my quantum mechanics is, they're bullshitting you. Okay, just to be perfectly frank about that.
Richard Feynman, I think, said that. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's some fascinating indications from quantum mechanics. But idealism is the idea that consciousness is the origin of reality, basically. I guess you could say that. Because here's the thing is, we can't know anything about reality before consciousness, right? We can't. If we do a scientific study of reality, we're still interacting. The observer's still interacting with it.
Oh, sure.
Because we don't have direct access to reality, right? I mean, everything is filtered through our consciousness. Even if we run a scientific experiment, we're still observing it.
Sure. Yeah. Everything.
And so
you start with Descartes. I think therefore I am. That's the only thing I can start with.
Yeah. Well, I don't quite agree with Descartes because he's a hard dualist, right? So I don't believe in a hard dualism, as in mind and body, right? Completely separate.
Okay. So reality itself is from consciousness, of which we have a sampling in ourselves.
Yes.
Something along those lines.
Yep.
Sure. I can see that. See, the thing is, go ahead, continue. I want to hear this from a Christian's perspective. How does that fit into Christianity?
Well, I think it fits very well, in my opinion, right? So, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God spoke existence into being, right? That's Genesis 1, John 1. So the super conscience is God from the Christian's perspective, right? He is conscious, a conscious agent. And he exists before all things, all matter, all material, all time, space. And it's from him that material existence emanates. And the idea, well, also, you got I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a double slit experiment in quantum mechanics.
Yep. Yeah.
which seems to indicate that nothing is anything until it's consciously observed,
Yeah. Or the
or
measure
nothing
can-
is. Yeah,
Sorry.
nothing is nowhere until it's everything's a potential, a wave of potential until it's observed, and then it's set when it's observed consciously. There, it seems, and not only is it set at that moment that it's observed, but it's set all the way back in history, right?
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't agree with that actually,
Yeah. Well,
um, but yeah,
that's one way of understanding it.
it is one way of understanding it. Yes. Yeah. The other way to understand it is that your measurements affect the experiment in the first place.
Yeah.
And you'll never be able to get away from that, especially at the smallest
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Um, and that's one way to understand it, and from what I understand, is a valid way to understand it. Okay, it's not just
Yeah.
making stuff up.
I can't contradict it.
That seems to be the indication. Like quantum mechanics, okay, like I said, nobody absolutely knows quantum mechanics, but there's indications and there's theories. There's different competing sets of theories. And so with idealism, right? How does it work with a Christian framework? Okay, so idealism is consciousness precedes everything. Like it's the ontological primitive. It's the primitive. It's you can't go beyond consciousness, right? We can't explore beyond consciousness, but further
Sure.
than consciousness. It's where we have to start. And the idea that, and also like quantum relative, how does it go? What's the word?
I
Quantum
can't say.
Huh?
I can't say. I don't know where you're going with it.
Well, it's relative quantum mechanics, something like that. But that the things aren't a thing unto itself. It's only things in relation to others.
I'll have to look into that. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah. Carlo Rovelli is a big one on that. He's one of the leading guys on that.
Sure.
But you know that the basic idea is, what is a chair? Well, a chair is something you sit on. Okay, so you've got a stump that's cut off. Is it a chair? Well, if you use it as a chair, it is a chair. But it's not a chair if you don't use it as a chair. It's just a stump.
Sure.
Right? Something like that. I don't know. I'm not an expert. Okay.
What I'm hearing is this idealism, or sorry, you're right, idealism for Christianity.
Yeah.
God is consciousness. Matter emerges from consciousness, and then we are pieces of that consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're located. Yeah. We're temporally located through our physical body.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an interesting theory. It explains, I guess, if you wanted to use it for Christianity, I would say you've got origins there. I don't know how that wraps around to final judgment or endings. Yeah.
Well, I haven't tied it in that, but I've tied it into the incarnation of Jesus Christ, right? The incarnation of God.
Sure.
Because if the idea is, in order for that any consciousness to actually interact with in a temporal location, it has to be localized. So if God was going to directly act in our time and space, he would have to be incarnated in a physical body in order to be localized.
I feel like I'm going to challenge you here.
Okay.
So how do you then interpret the stories where he's not in a body and interacting with time and space in the Old Testament? Do you take those metaphorically?
I believe there's Christophanies in the Old Testament.
So I mean, like you said, he could only interact if he embodied an actual body. That's the incarnation of Jesus as God in earth. But there was God as a fiery tornado, and there was God as thunder. There was God as the wind in the Old Testament, where he performed acts. he shot arrows at the people who touched the mountain, that kind of thing.
Well, we got the angel of the Lord, that capital A, angel of the Lord, right? It's in a body, and it comes. And a Christophany is just that we see Christ in the Old Testament. That's the pre-incarnate Christ.
Oh, sure. It's like the same root as
Right.
Epiphany.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
a theophany is a presence of God, or God appears, right? It's a theophany. Theos meaning God, and phany, I don't know what that word means. But a Christophany is an appearance of Christ in the old appearance of Christ, right? Or pre-incarnate, the eternal Son is what I confess, right? So pre-incarnation Christ being manifest in the Old Testament. That's what a Christophany would be.
So would you say then that if God acts in the world through Christ, Christ is how God acts in the world? And are you saying then Christ is also how God acted in the world in the Old Testament? All interactions occurred through Christ?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, I'm sorry to press you here. I don't want to make it
Go ahead.
contentious or anything, but in like the
Go ahead.
Exodus story, you've got I think if you translate it, it's like the destroyer that kills all the firstborns. That was Christ?
No, I don't think the destroyer was Christ. I'm not sure what the destroyer was. It was an angel, Lord, maybe, I don't know. I mean that's a hard one, right? Because
No,
I don't want to ever say, you know. Anyways, there's a way of understanding that, and when we can go into it. But I think that was more. I don't think that was.
Yeah.
I don't think the destroyer was the pre-incarnate Christ. There are angels of the Lord, and then there's the angel of the Lord. Okay, and what we see with the angel of the Lord, some translations will actually capitalize that A, like the NIV usually will. And what that means is it's got the name of the Lord is in it, in that angel, right? And it speaks as God. So you got to understand the name of the Lord means that it is essentially the Lord.
Yeah, it's
right?
the essence of, yeah.
Yeah. And so when the angel of the Lord also speaks as though he is the Lord, right? He doesn't say, and the Lord says, he says, I say, or basically, right? Something like that. He speaks as the Lord. But then there's also regular angels, right? What you call angels. Angels it's not a good word because that means messenger, right?
Sure.
But there's spiritual in the Old Testament. There's spiritual beings who aren't messengers of God. There's other spiritual beings, right? So I would think that the destroyer is a spiritual being sent by God, but not Christ.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just trying to fit it all together. I enjoy thinking about other frameworks for existence. I think there's a lot of them out there that are coherent. If you were to say, for example, in idealism, consciousness began, and then from consciousness came matter, I can go, yeah, that's cool. I can get behind that. But then I don't know how to tie it back into the book. Like, I don't know how to get from there to, and the rest of the details are in these pages. And of course, you can say that, I guess you just have to say at some point that this was the book through which more was communicated about stuff. But that's typically where I get stuck. Like, there's a lot of other theories that I really enjoy. The Egg by Andy Weir is probably my favorite alternative theory of the universe. But there's the 5-minute God hypothesis from Bertrand Russell, which I love thinking about. Are you familiar with that one?
No.
So Bertrand Russell said, if God talked about creating the Earth 6,000 years ago, he was talking to people who were young Earth creationists, and they said, well, it doesn't matter that it would take light that long to get to us. It could have been created midway. And Bertrand Russell said, yeah, you could do that. But then you can also say that God created the world 5 minutes ago, and all my memories were there. And so we can just assume that.
Yeah.
And so that's a wild thought experiment.
Yeah.
But
And some of the indications of, like I was saying, like how I was explaining the double slit experiment. If
Sure.
the particle is a wave of potential, and then whenever it's observed, it's not only set then, but also went back in the past, it's conceivable that we could have been created yesterday, and we wouldn't know any difference.
Yeah.
I don't.
Until consciousness happens. Yeah.
That's not something I'm going to argue as what's happened, but there's a possibility there.
Yeah.
But I'm not a young Earth creationist, by the way.
Sure. I don't.
Yeah, but-
yeah. No, I think I heard it from other Christians on Twitter actually talking about a similar theory. They talked about the bicameral mind, the theory from that guy who said that we didn't become conscious until around like 2000 BC. Like, we wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey before we were conscious, and then we had a moment where consciousness happened. So, what? I guess. And then but you could say with your interpretation of quantum mechanics that, yeah, if we became conscious right there, that set the rest of history before it. Because that's when we started observing things, right?
Yeah. And it's not my interpretation. It's an interpretation
Sure.
as I understand it. As I understand it.
To you.
Yeah. I didn't think you were, but I just want to make that clear for any viewer or listener. It's an interpretation that as I understand it. So sort of it is mine. But I would say you would have to at least go back to the dawn of Homo sapien.
Sure.
I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying it is. You know what? I don't have all the answers, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Let's get that on the table.
Yeah.
Let's get. I'm not going to say I do. And that's another problem with the anti-intellectualism that does exist within Christianity, is we get into this trap of thinking we have to have an answer or provide an answer instead of saying, I don't know. And I think sometimes it's perfectly fine to say, I don't know.
The same trap exists on the other side as well. There's a lot of people who are not Christian who think it's all figured out. I disagree with them.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't have to have everything figured out, but I can offer ideas, right? So I think it's possible, right? So, say theistic evolution, that we have God set the evolution in motion. He created and set everything in motion. Well, I think it's possible that whenever we have the Adam and Eve story, I'm not saying this is what I believe. I think it's possible I don't need an interpretation for myself.
Sure.
I think it's possible that when we get to Adam and Eve and we're talking about God creating human beings, it's entirely possible that this is God putting consciousness in the Homo sapiens. That's not necessarily a great theory that I could prove or anything. That's just an idea.
I think that's William Lane Craig endorses a very similar view.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible, but I don't know.
Yeah, it is possible.
Or it's not possible.
I'm willing to say that a lot of that stuff is possible. You can say, for example, that the physics we know of today didn't apply in history. Unfortunately, you're limited in terms of learning about history in that manner. In my opinion, the only way to know things is to predict things moving forward. And that's where I see this big gap between what some people perceive to be a war between science and religion. Science predicts things happening now in the world. I think religion tries to predict things that happens after the world. Like they're saying, if you do this, if you fail to believe, if you commit murder or something, I'm not going to say what's going to happen tomorrow to you, but I am going to say what's going to happen eventually to you. So they make a prediction like that. But to me, it's just at this point in my belief structure, I place all those beliefs in the same area. I can't really pick between them. You've got the Hindu Dharma, the Buddhist reincarnation. They say if you're a bad person, you come back as a toad. I can't say. I couldn't possibly pick between all the different options that happen to things after life. But I can say that I think that, but I can say that one of the things that helped break down I don't want to say helped break down my faith, but one of the things that eroded my faith was I believed that my faith was not just a predictor of the afterlife and the origin. I believed it was a predictor of the world. And so it could say things about the world. It would say that if there was a particular group of faithful people, they would not experience as much ill will, natural disaster, disease as a group of non-believers or a group of adulterers or a group of murderers. And because I believed that, when I started to see that not happening or predicting things, that eroded part of my faith. Not all of it. Some people think, like, well, hold on, you're like, oh, Christianity for that? I didn't. But it did hurt.
Let me acknowledge that is a hard thing.
Yeah.
Okay? That is a validly hard thing to observe and to struggle with.
I think there's an easy way around it. I just became a Christian that said, all will be made balanced later.
Well,
yeah.
One of the problems with that idea is God never actually promises that everything will go perfectly for you in this life, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I wanted to. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to acknowledge that is a validly hard thing to face.
Yeah, and like I said, it didn't break my faith. My faith, if you wanted to get into it, maybe for the last part of the chat, my faith crumbled when I couldn't reconcile hell as something that I should praise. So I'd be curious to hear your take on it, because obviously when I say hell, I mean my concept of hell when I was a Christian.
The eternal conscious torment hell?
Yeah, which depended on you acknowledging Jesus specifically. So I had, for example, I found no other purpose in life but to spread the word. I couldn't find purpose to getting an education other than learning how to better spread the word. I couldn't find purpose to any kind of pleasurable activity. I couldn't find purpose to a lot of things unless they were commanded. It was supposed to be, I need to save the people who haven't heard God's word yet. that was my version of hell and judgment. And so that ruined my faith.
Yeah. I can see that. Okay, so I didn't come to faith until much later in life. So, and that's one of the annoying things that happens to me online with some subset of atheists is they'll always, or these particular types will say, well, you were indoctrinated, that's why you believe. It's like, no, I wasn't indoctrinated.
Yeah.
I did a personal journey at the age of 38 and 39. And yes, I went to church, but I believe that I did a personal study and followed the evidence. That's how I believe it.
Yeah.
How I examined it. And if you look at my pinned thread, which I think gets overlooked, because if someone's going to interpret you poorly without charity, then they're going to interpret you in the worst possible light, and there's nothing you can do about that. But I did try to specify that in my journey on my pinned tweet, which is not the whole thing. I actually had my mind changed. Huh?
I said, you mean you didn't summarize your entire journey in 10 tweets?
Yeah. But I had my presuppositions and my previous ideas violated. That is, broken down. The evidence that I found was contrary to what I had assumed. But so I came much later in faith. And as far as hell goes, right? So I'm very tentative about hell or the afterlife even. Mm-hmm. It's not something as a believer I've felt compelled to study. Okay? I know that God will work it out. Mm-hmm. And I believe he's perfectly just and perfectly merciful and perfectly loving and all that. I would love to be a universalist. I would love to. To a large degree. I would love for all people to be saved. I would love that there's somehow going to be that. I can't justify it through Scripture. Okay, so I don't believe in eternal conscious torment. That much I do. I don't believe that there's, as far as like, being burned in fire all the time. I believe I'm kind of in two possible scenarios as far as I believe.
Sure.
I lean towards annihilationism. Okay. I lean more towards that those who don't believe will be cease to exist. Or kind of the Great Divorce C.S. Lewis stance. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
I think I know what you mean. You're just separated from God in the afterlife,
Yeah,
and that is a torture itself, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of where I fall. I'm sort of hopeful universalist to a degree, but I can't confirm it. And
Sarah thinks it's funny.
Funny because Kyle said we all know it takes 11 tweets.
I see, yeah.
Which is pretty funny. But I would describe myself as a hopeful universalist, but I can't go that far.
Yeah. I don't think people can if they read Jesus, to be honest, when he says that only a few will take the correct path.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I do trust God to be perfectly just and merciful, and to be vague but somewhat clear. I have a lot of different views than your common Protestant, what you would commonly think of a Protestant. I trend very hard towards the Eastern Orthodox.
Sure.
But I don't quite confirm Eastern Orthodoxy as well. I can't quite go all the way over there. But see, it was Jordan Peterson that got me to take the Bible seriously. And Jonathan Pageau really helped me understand the Bible. I don't know if you know Jonathan Pageau.
I don't. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's Pageau. What is it? The Symbolic World is his YouTube channel. And he's Eastern Orthodox, and he's actually I found him through Peterson. But so there's a lot of symbolism there, right? That I understand the Bible through. I don't necessarily affirm Genesis 1 as literal physical creation. And the closest approximation I can give you to my understanding is actually from John Walton, who's an Old Testament scholar. It's symbolic. Genesis 1 is symbolic, but I still confirm that God created all things, that he is the big C creator, because there's plenty of other places where you can find that. But I don't read Genesis 1 as literal physical creation. I read it as symbolic temple creation.
Sure. I mean, those are good answers for me. I don't need you to know exactly what you believe about hell either. I don't expect it. Like, I'm not going to be, oh, come on, can't you have some more certain ideas? No, I don't care.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their own path. Everyone has their own journey. I know everyone in the pew next to me when I was at church believed a different thing than I did. Like, I know, I'm familiar with how that works. So don't worry. I'm not. I'm very happy with that answer. I appreciate it. I guess I'll just. Is there any other things you'd like to chat about? Because that was the last thing on my list. I wanted to make sure I touched with you on the hell topic. I wanted to get your opinion on it.
Okay. So just to put a bit of a bow on that.
Sure.
Hell, I don't know. Okay.
I like it.
I am bothered by the idea, especially of eternal conscious torment. I am definitely bothered by that. I'm bothered by anybody perishing. I wish that all would have life.
Yeah.
Eternal life, right? I lean towards annihilationism and maybe like a great divorce separation. where people choose to separate from themselves from God. So that's where I stand on, and I can't confirm or deny one or the other on that. I just don't believe in eternal conscious torment. I don't think that's there. I don't think that's revealed in God's character, and I don't think that's revealed in Scripture.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a common belief. My parents believe the same thing, and one of the reasons they're not upset with me anymore, and they were upset when they found out I wasn't Christian, is because I promised them that, you know, I am not one that would turn God away. If someone asks me to pray, I'll pray. I'll try it out. I'm not going to spend all my day doing it. I got other things to do.
Yeah.
But I'll give things a try. I always have an open mind. If God presents himself to me, I won't turn him away. And so in that frame of reference, my parents were okay, because they only believe that people who go to hell are people who turn God away. You know, I wait with bated breath for him to show himself to me, whether it's now or in the afterlife. And if it's like that weird passage my Lutheran pastor said, and the door is open from hell, and I end up in hell, and I say, "Oh God, I believe it. I'll walk through that door."
That's sort of like a purgatory idea. I mean,
it is. It's very strange, though. Non-standard.
And yeah, well, his response, yes, but
his response, you know.
I'm actually, you know, if it were my choice type of thing, I'm okay with purgatory if it were the case. But again, I don't have enough to confirm nor deny it. I mean, I don't have enough to confirm it. I do think that, yeah, that's a whole can of worms.
Well, I guess what I could add to it is that where I ended up with that story, when I couldn't wrestle my, I also could not find scriptural basis for purgatory. I couldn't find scriptural basis for everyone way to heaven, for universalism. In fact, I sincerely believe Jesus when he said that only a few would walk the righteous path. I sincerely believe the majority of people would go to hell, and I could not. Once I realized that, I could no longer praise it. I couldn't pray. I couldn't worship.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And I don't know if it's just inbuilt in my personality or my soul, but that's something that I won't ever be able to praise. And so that was the sort of the finality of it. After that day onward, I started wishing for it to not be true. But I accepted it. I said, I wish it wasn't true, but this is the case. But that attitude in my head, where I started wishing for it not to be true, that's when I started looking down the path of believing.
Yeah, well, not to say that you necessarily did this, but we can compel ourselves to find the evidence to believe what we want to believe.
Yeah.
If we arrive at a point. So, anyways, I'm not saying that you necessarily did that, but we can do that. Not maybe I did that in my journey to faith. I don't think I did, as far as I can tell. Do you know are you familiar with the term penal substitutionary atonement?
No. Penal, penitentiary, it sounds a lot like sacrifice for someone else's sins kind of idea.
Yeah. It's very common in the Reformed, particularly Reformed theology, which would be Lutheranism and Calvinism and such. Big R Reformed.
I figured.
Yeah. And it's actually fairly pervasive in Western Christianity through Augustine. All right, St. Augustine. It kind of starts with him and then goes through Calvin. I'm not sure. Well, I think Lutheranism has actually moved quite a ways away from Luther himself, from what I understand. But
yeah, I just recently read the 95 Theses a couple months ago. He's a different dude than the Lutheranism I was raised on.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's interesting about Luther is the last thing he wanted is not to be in the Catholic Church. Is like he didn't want to leave the Catholic Church; he wanted to reform it.
Big R reformed, yeah.
Yeah, but that was like the last thing he wanted to do was to be out of the Catholic Church. But so penal substitution, yeah, it's what it sounds like. It's penalty substitution and atonement, right? So it's the penalty is cast upon Christ for the substitution of the atonement, but it's a retributive justice, right? It's a legal justice, it's a legal penalty, right? And it's very pervasive in Western Christianity. Well, penal substitution atonement is actually something that I reject because I don't think it's scriptural, and I think it creates a false picture of God. I don't think God is retributive. His justice isn't a retribution. I think his justice is restorative. And there's a whole can of worms in there. But,
Sure there is.
it's something that I think Western Christianity struggles greatly with, because there's no mercy in it, right? If the penalty has been paid, then there's no mercy, right? There's because it's been paid. It's like you can't say I charge you a $200 fine, you pay the $200, and like I give you mercy, right? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Or I get fined $200 and Baxter pays that $200 fine, and then then come back and say, "Hey, Ron, I give you mercy." You're like, "No, you've been paid." And so that's one of the things I think that creates a false impression, as I understand Christianity, and I think it gives a false impression of God, because if you go under the penalty, that penal substitution, there is no love or mercy involved.
It's a transaction.
Yeah, it's a transaction. It's a legal transaction. And that's a problem. Because that's not what Scripture says about God. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's a huge...
Can of worms, like you said.
Yeah.
Coming out. Yeah. Yeah.
But I reject penal substitutionary atonement.
Sure.
I do believe in a substitution. I believe in what's called a Christus Victor model. If you want to look that up. But
I do want to look that up.
There's a particular book that's very good. I could recommend. It's called Christus Victor. I can't remember the guy's name. It's very Eastern European. It's hard to remember offhand. Gustav Aulén, Aulen, but Christus Victor, and it seems to be a very early understanding. If you read the Church Fathers from the first, second, third, fourth century,
Yeah.
they seem to confirm it, and I think what it'd be fair to call a neo-orthodox is I try to like go back to the beginning, but not through necessarily the Catholic or the Orthodox Church.
Yeah. The unfortunate part is they all claim to try to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's another thing is I don't, Orthodox and Catholic will both confess that they're the real church, right? They're the one and only real church. And then Protestants will say whatever, I don't believe anyone who says we're the one true church. I think that there's a reason why there's multiple denominations, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the Reformation was not the reestablishment of the real church. It was a movement within the church to reform. One of the things about reformers, one of the statements is always reforming. And I think that's proper because human beings tend to corrupt all systems.
That is a central tenet in Christianity, isn't it?
Well, I think that bears itself out in history. I mean, all empires fall. It's kind of the same thing, ain't it?
Well, I'll tell you this much, Ron. I don't see you as a corrupter right now, and I hope you don't see me the same way.
Certainly don't see you as intending to. I see you.
Yeah,
But,
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. That's all I can ask for.
so, anyways, if you want to look up Christ as Victor, that's the model. See, the atonement is multi-layered. And since I trend eastward, I'm okay with mystery. Okay, so I think that we can know a lot about God or the atonement or all of it, but there still remains mystery. Because I'm also a charismatic Pentecostal. I'm also what I would describe myself as a Christian mystic, which is really against character for me because I've always grown up growing up I'm a super introvert, which me doing this right now is actually a miracle. It's a manifest miracle. I'm actually an introvert. I took the Big Five personality test and I literally scored a 0 on extroversion.
Wow.
So for me to and I do sermons now and I do Bible studies. I'm doing this show. I do have a radio show, a Christian radio show. All of that is like a manifest miracle for me to be able to do any of that. But I tend towards the east, and I'm okay. I would call myself a Christian mystic, and my atonement model that I pretty much subscribe to is, as much as I can understand it, is Christ as Victor.
Well, I've got it all in my notes, but I think I'm going to have to head out soon. But
yeah,
I
it's
very much
been
appreciate
almost
the
2 hours.
conversation, Ron. And
Yeah.
thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited on your show.
Well, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came. So I appreciate that. This is the first, by the way. This is the first time that I've had someone on my show that I didn't previously know, and I think it went very well. I appreciate your good faith conversation. I think you totally nailed that. I'm okay. I appreciate what you're trying to do. If you're a former Christian and you need help, I would recommend talking to Baxter.
Hey, I greatly appreciate that. Anyway, Ron, I hope you have a wonderful night. Yep. I hope you and your family do very well. And I saw the cat in the background, and I wish the cat well.
Yeah, we got 3 of those and 2 dogs, and they keep. Yeah. But thank you, Baxter. I hope that you have a great success. I'll see you around on Twitter. I'll go ahead and follow you. I didn't do that. I thought I had already done that, but I hadn't. I'll go ahead and follow you, and maybe we'll see us around.
Who knows? Maybe we'll be back for season 3.
All right. Thank you. Do you have anything particular that you would like to plug? I mean, do you have like a website or anything?
I do hope to start a YouTube channel in the future, but it's not up yet. So I'll just say follow me on Twitter at Baxter Williams _.
The thing I would say about starting a YouTube channel is it's got to be a labor of love, because it's not going to just jump out there and take off.
Oh yeah. Everyone starts small. All right.
Yep.
Have a good
All right. Thank you. Yeah, good night.